Welcome to the Hunting Beast Report, a live video podcast with Dan Infalt and host Jeremy Gillespie.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Stealth Outdoors. The off-season's a great time to rehab your gear, so head on over to Stealth Outdoors at www.stealthoutdoors.com to pick up some climbing stick wraps, cam buckle covers, platform cable wraps, or stealth strip rolls for all of your miscellaneous silencing needs. Today's show is also made possible by Hunting Beast Gear, innovators in mobile hunting gear and the designers of the Beast Sticks and Beast Stand. Check out the latest products at www.huntingbeastgear.com. And now, on to the podcast. All right, welcome back, everyone. Today we're live. We got special guest Jake Hofer and Chad Slyvester from Exodus Outdoors. How you guys doing today?
Doing great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, they're doing well. Enjoying the evening.
Yeah, short notice for you guys, so I appreciate you jumping on. We called Chad and Jake this morning, and they said, sure, we'd love to jump on. And kind of some late breaking news. We got a trail camera ban coming out of Iowa. So who better to have on than the guys that are the trail camera gurus? So let's just kick it off right there. I'd like to know from Jake and Chad, when did this law or rule come out? I don't even know. Can you touch on, is that a regulation or a draft proposal and what you know about it? So I don't know which one of you want to start, but go ahead.
Well, I'll give us both a big disclaimer here. We're going off a lot of information that we have seen and heard from hearsay. And, you can find a lot of stuff here online. And to answer your question, they basically updated the law. So it wasn't a bill that got passed and voted on and everything else. So they basically just updated a previous law, one stroke with the pen. And I believe that becomes effective June 5th, which ironically is tomorrow. So tomorrow, that'll be the law of the land.
Yep.
So now it's both public and private, right? On cell cams?
Yeah. Well, there's a couple different points that pertain to trail cameras. One that is gaining the most buzz, I feel like, is the now black and white regulations around leaving any trail camera, on public land for more than 24 hours. Or I guess technically, I'm not sure if the reg is now 24 hours or if it's specifically overnight. But that seems like, the public land advocates, that seems to be what people are talking about. But at the same point in time, they've also now made it black and white on the stance of using the aid of any electronic device while actively hunting to pursue game. And that regulation has always been in place. We've talked about this a handful of years ago when we were kind of going up against the Boone and Crockett Club and Pope and Young about their rules against fair chase. And we talked about the states that were kind of gray, where they weren't specifically calling out cell cameras, but it was written in the way that any electronic device.
Wisconsin has a law like that.
Right. So, and there's a lot of other states too. So to Jake's point, they've now made it very black and white that we cannot leave trail cameras out overnight on public land. We can still use them. Now, that opens up another can of worms with the aid of electronics while actively hunting. We interpret that as cell cameras cannot be used, public or private, if you have a weapon on your body or on person while you're in the field. So there's still, a lot of clarifications, I think, that will eventually come to the surface. But there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, interesting. And let's get your take on enforcement, because that was the first thing that kind of came up to me is talking about private land. That one that seems like overreach for sure, at least in my opinion. And two, how are they going to enforce this stuff?
Man, great question. And I think that the one thing that people don't realize is a lot of states, game wardens don't need search warrants. I know Tennessee is actually updating that to where they would need a search warrant. So I think that's a pretty important clarification. But to your point, what is active pursuit? How do they? I mean, the game wardens, they're busy, man. I wouldn't want their job. I went to college initially wanting to do that and realizing that's a job I don't want to have. I mean, it's just tough. And so I don't know how they really regulate that. I bet you what will eventually happen is someone's going to shoot a really big deer, and there's probably going to be cell cam pictures of it, and it'll probably unfold in that way, and it'll help clarify what exactly they mean from a legislation perspective would be my guess. And it's just very there's a lot of ambiguity to it right now, and I think that it's a little bit unknown. And I think that within our community, when there's unknown, a lot of people draw a lot of conclusions and consider it fact. And I think that's probably the phase we're in right now. And I think we'll have a lot more clarity after a season, or probably after 2 seasons in reality. So I don't know how they're going to enforce it. And it's like, what's a security camera at a gate versus one over a scrape? And it's like, it's very interesting. And I'm surprised that they didn't have more clarity when they decided to do this and left it as vague as it is.
Yeah. So Dan, we'll turn it over to you. There was a thread on the Beast. You posted it and a bunch of responses, and it was kind of split down the middle. So give me your take, and just for full disclosure, I did warn Jake and Chad that you and I on the public front were both just fine with the ban. Obviously you guys have a business interest there. Doesn't mean that's your only reason, right, for feeling one way or the other. But we wanted to have you guys on so we could have kind of a pros and cons discussion, professional and all that. So Dan, talk about that thread on the Beast and what your opinion is and what some of the reactions were.
Yeah, I don't think I started that thread. Somebody else did. I just got involved in it. But my thought on it is, personally, I kind of like cameras, and I like using them. They're fun, but in moderation. I'm starting to know people. There's a couple people down the street here, younger guys, got a YouTube channel. Each one of them, the 2 boys, has over 100 cell cams out each. And I mean, a big portion of their paycheck goes into paying for them. And I'm starting to hear more and more of this, where all these guys got all these cameras out. And some of the public land where I'm at in Wisconsin here, where it is legal, I think it was a half dozen different hunts I went on last fall where I got to the tree that I was going to hunt out of, and there was a camera chained to the tree that I was going to hunt out of. I think there was about 12 or 13 hunts where there was a camera overlooking the trail I was going to hunt. And one of the ways I hunt has changed dramatically, where I used to look for parking lots that were empty, so you had a spot where nobody's hunting a deer. And now I look for parking lots that are full, because that means there's a big deer there, because everybody's going to those big deer because everybody knows about them, because there's cameras literally everywhere. When I hunted in Iowa last fall, in 2 weeks, I got probably over a dozen messages from people that I know when I'm hundreds of miles from my house. Over a dozen people messaged me that I know that saw me on cameras, and the majority of them asked me to please not hunt there because that's their spot. That they're hunting that deer. And it gets annoying. I mean, you can't go anywhere in privacy anymore. I used to love the cameras in the matter of that, if you used 2 or 3 of them and it was fun, it would help you in places. And I really love it as a learning tool. And I absolutely don't think that it should be banned on private land. I think people on private land should be able to do what they want. I know I use them on my private property here, and they're 50% security, 50% watching the animals. And I don't even hunt on my land. I just like to watch the animals here, So I think people on private land should be able to do what they want, kind of, to a point. I mean, I don't want them killing every deer on their land or anything like that. But if they want to use cameras, fine, because they're impacting their own hunting. When you're on public and they're everywhere, it's crazy. And I don't really want them to be banned, per se. But I think that it's getting to be an issue with how many are out there and how do you control that. I know, for instance, when I go to hunt Minnesota for bear, when I first started hunting up there, you had to register your baits, but you'd have as many as you wanted. And we'd put out about 3 baits each, but there were certain people up there that would put out about 10 each, and they put them all over the place. And all of a sudden you didn't have any place to hunt. Every place where there was a point going into a swamp, there was a bait there. So the DNR there made a rule that you had to give them the coordinates of your baits. You had to register them, and you could only have 3 baits per person. And then it got usable. I could see something like that, but I don't know how the hell they'd regulate it. You know, in Wisconsin, the law is you have to have your name, address, DNR number on your cameras. One or the other, the DNR number or your name number or whatever. And man, every time I see a camera, I look around and look on it, it's never there. So most of the cameras here are illegal anyways. So I don't know if it's going to just stop, you know, legitimate legal people or what. But I mean, you got a much more, once they're outlawed, I think you got more likely people are going to turn them into the DNR. And I know our DNR here actively looks for illegal cameras because our local warden has asked me several times, have you seen any that are illegal out there? So you could get people turning them in if they're illegal. So, and that's kind of my take. I know it's a little wishy-washy, but that's kind of how I feel. What do you think, guys?
Well, just a couple quick questions there, Dan, to get your personal take or personal opinion on it. Do you think, because we hear, like, we're pretty engaged in some of this stuff, plus with our customer base, we're constantly listening to feedback. I mean, Jake's pretty in tune on the content world, and like this is a buzz that's been building consistently over the last, I want to say 30 months ish, maybe 24, 30 months. Basically, when Boone and Crockett and Pope and Young, when the first wave started to happen, I believe Utah, Arizona, like some of those Western states, which I kind of understood their standpoint because they're spending resource dollars, right, on man-made water features to help habitat. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, boom, you have 300 cameras literally on a water hole, which is ultimately putting pressure on those animals, preventing them from using the resource that our tax money was spent to aid those animals. So I get some of the Western stuff, but back to your talking points, Dan, do you think for you, is it more of a spot claiming thing or is it more of a privacy thing? Because we've heard both of these.
Yeah, to me, I don't care about the privacy. I'm not doing anything wrong. I could care less about the privacy, but when I get to a spot and there's a camera there, I just feel like somebody's claimed the spot to me personally. And it's kind of like I just keep abandoning the spots and going looking for another one. That's kind of it with me, but
got it.
It's
interesting.
What about just real quick, I found it interesting how much your tactic has changed from trying to find where there was no sign to where, quite literally, if there's a bunch of cameras, this tells you that there's a big deer in there, which is really interesting.
I don't
to see
necessarily
where 5 years ago on a camera.
Right. I think a lot of people that are like in favor of the ban are in favor of it for a wrong reason. They think it's making people much better hunters. I don't think so. I think you still got to have skill. If you're putting a camera in a spot and thinking that you can just watch that spot and kill a deer, it's possible, but it ain't going to make you a better hunter. What everybody that I know that's a good hunter does with a camera is they find a deer like in a feeding area or something, and then they know where, you know, if they're hunters, they know how to look at the area and know where it lives and go hunt it. And that's what I do. So that's why it's kind of disheartening to sneak into a bedding area and there's 4 cameras in there, you know, watching it from different angles, you know. But I have noticed that it's not everywhere, but it's starting to hit the bigger, more popular properties quite a bit. And last year, early season, I went to an island way back in the swamp where I hunt, where it's like a mile back and I got to go through waist deep water and stuff. And ran into a cell cam out there, and the guy had taken the tree that I hunt out of that had marks in it from me hunting, so you knew I was hunting out of it, and set that up for hunting, knowing I'm hunting there, and put a camera right where my camera goes. And it turned out I ran into the guy. He's from Texas. He came up here, put the camera there from Texas, came up on several hunts from Texas to hunt it, and he figured out the spot by watching my YouTube videos. Not that's kind of not bothering everybody else. That's more of my problem, but it's just it's just weird cameras that are showing up everywhere.
Wow.
Well, I don't want to put you guys on the spot, but Jake and Chad, what do you guys think are reasonable approaches to this? And what I mean by that is kind of what Dan said. I mean, and obviously I don't want you guys to say anything that you're going to be held to or whatever. We didn't really talk about this in the pre-show, but what do you think would be a reasonable solution? Just leave it as is, totally ban it, register your cameras. I'm sure you guys have talked about this. What do you think's reasonable?
Yeah. We both have a little bit of different takes, so I don't want to speak for Jake and I together. I think we both have different opinions on this, but I think collectively we're against government overreach and additional regulation legislation that takes choices away from us as individuals. I like across the board. I don't think that's just relating to hunting, but also I also understand as a society, like we can't govern ourselves. We're not like, we are so short-term focused on what we're doing now or 5 minutes from now or tomorrow that we don't see the long game of what like the impact of those decisions that we're making daily have on the long-term effect of what we're actually doing. So I think the regulation is needed. The challenge is, and Dan you both kind of alluded to this, is regardless of what Department of Natural Resources or the entity that's the governing entity or the LEO of that state that's enforcing these regulations, they're so massively understaffed and under-resourced that they can't enforce and regulate the existing legislations and game laws and regulations, but yet they keep adding new and new and new and new, and it's a little bit. I don't have an answer for you, I guess, is a long-winded way I'm getting around this, but it seems like we're at a place where we wanted to be public land spokesmen and women, right? And I know Dan's an advocate, Jake and I are advocates, and we promote this thing that we call public land to celebrate it. And we spend literally tens of thousands of dollars in both money from the business and our time going out, picking up trash and doing improvements on public land. But yet, then when people start to use it, everyone starts to. I gotta watch my words here. I don't want to cuss on live air. But people start to complain that it's being overcrowded. But yet, that's what we want. We want more people to enjoy and take part in this recreation. But then when it gets crowded and it's taking away from me, everybody wants to complain about it. So it's a me problem, and like. It goes back to, I think, the root of this is.
I like the people. I mean, I'm not running into that many people.
Well, no. I'm not saying. I'm just saying in general. And I think that, we got to a place where this QDM stuff over the last 20 years, right? Like everybody wants to focus on killing bigger, older deer. And everyone does that for their own individual reasons. And the guys that really are driven by that do it because it's in here, not because it's a movement on social. But yet we also have this thing that's happening that when other people see another person kill a big deer and it's not theirs, or they killed it on public and they were watching that deer, they feel entitled to it. Now all of a sudden everybody's pointing their finger left and right, and you and me and this and that, and it's like, what the hell are we doing? I know that's a little bit of a tangent and probably didn't really answer your question, but like that's just the way I feel. Like this thing is such a
I get that totally. I mean, to kind of go on that, that big buck I got last year, I had no idea that was there. I didn't have a camera in that woods. I shot that buck. I knew there was something good in there, but I didn't know it was that big. And when I shot that buck, it opened up a whole can of worms. I had the people that like me that sent me trail cam pictures of the buck that had pictures. I had a guy with a drone send me drone footage of it. I had the neighbor had trail cam pictures on private land. He accused me of poaching it because the deer never went on public, apparently. And I started getting all kinds of accusations of poaching because people had pictures of different spots and stuff like that. Luckily, I videotaped my hunts and could show where I shot it. But it was crazy how many people knew about that buck.
Real quick, getting back to the original question, Jake, how do you feel about that?
Yours get impacted.
Go ahead, finish your thought, Dan. Unless did he freeze
I was
out?
going to say, I don't want to see a business like yours get impacted. I don't want to see cameras go away, but there's got to be some sort of solve to, one on every tree. If you take a 1,000-acre property and you have 250 guys hunting it, and they each use 4 or 5 cameras on an average, which I think is probably pretty legitimate. I mean, you start having a camera per acre, every place you go.
Yeah, I mean, I think the baiting parallel to cameras, I think that's a really great potential way. The thing that I'm always asking is, I think the root of this legislation change in Iowa was to keep junk off the ground, right? Like that's what it was. And I don't remember seeing a lot of, I guess, public movement or the people that are constituents of Iowa or Iowa hunters really having a really uniform push for this. So I find that interesting, but I really think that something like the baiting would make a lot of sense. I think that it's clearly that this trend is probably going to continue. I hate to say it, I think it's going to continue to leach over into other states. And I also think it'll be very interesting to see what happens to the deer. Like for the example that you provided, Dan, where someone went out way back and put a camera. Take cameras out of the equation. That guy's probably never going back in there. And it's a spot that and it's a spot that you can probably kill a deer. And so I think that I'll be curious to see how the deer behave differently. And obviously we're not going to know that because we don't have cameras. But the other thing too is obviously I really enjoy running cameras, period. I think you can learn a lot, to your point, Dan, and you take that away. We're at a new chapter of hunting, period, point blank. And I don't know what the next chapter looks like. And we're going to find out one way or another. And I guess the lack of public recourse has me a little concerned in general.
Yeah, and I just want to chime in real quick. The point Chad made about government intervention and regulation, I agree with all that. And my concern is if they do implement a ban like this, again, I don't have a problem with it personally, but out west, you see this with shed hunting, right? There's all these rules about shed hunting now and closures and stuff. And every year, who does that stop? All the law-abiding people. Who doesn't not stop? So if they make cell cams illegal, there's a percentage, and I think and I hope it's a small percentage of hunters that are, and I don't even like to call the guys that are breaking the laws hunters. So there's still a small percentage of people out there that are going to be utilizing this technology for their unfair advantage. So that's one of my concerns with it.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah. Just on the enforcement side, it's the guys that are doing the shady stuff. They're like you said, you're stopping the people who are trying to do it the right way. I mean, that's ultimately who we're impacting here.
Yeah, and it'd be hard to track someone that wanted to do it dishonest too.
Overall, I think.
Yeah, I was just saying, like you people that. Go ahead, Dan. We got a little delay here.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but I was going to say that I know it's not talked about a whole lot, but I do think trail cameras solve a lot of crimes. They've caught a lot of people over the years doing things wrong. Part of the reason some people want their privacy in the woods, But I know people who've caught people dragging deer off of their property or dragging deer out of the woods in the middle of the night or sneaking by their camera with a rifle at night, and they get caught because of it, So cameras have a lot of good too. And I mean, I use them for security around my house a lot, around my yard, my house, to know what's going on. So I'm not against cameras. I'm just, and I'm really happy you guys are open to having a, hard conversation. But if we're not having this conversation, everybody's thinking it anyways,
And I'll add to that point, Dan. We've talked about this internally too. There's a perception around cell cameras that the guy has one, right out the back door. Like every cell camera owner has one right out the back door and has the ability to get a picture sent to their phone, and they're buzzing down the road and they got the buck killed in 5 minutes.
Right.
I'm not saying that does not happen, because there are cases and you hear stories where that does happen. But even in some capacity, because for me, that device gives me essentially time back. It allows me to spend more time on my business, allows me to spend more time with my family, allows me to spend more time scouting, doing other things in the woods, etc. So if the technological advancements are the concerns and some of the root cause for this legislation, it's just like, let's put some type of regulation on the manufacturing side that prevents live feeds, live streams, and those real-time uploads, and make them be on a 6-hour delay or 12-hour delay or once a day, 24-hour delay. Like the guys who are using those cameras with purposeful intent and are still hunting and not being reliant on the cameras, like that's not going to affect anybody, right? Like that's not going to affect you. It's not going to affect me. Not, it doesn't solve the camera per acre situation that's, that people are concerned about, but it does solve some of the conversations and the concerns about how, like, what is fair chase? How far are we going to take technology in the aid of, in the aid of hunting?
Yeah.
No,
Yeah, I
great.
kind of agree with that.
Yeah. For everyone that's listening, we're gonna talk about two other topics here. We're gonna talk about what's new with Exodus, and we're also gonna get some trail camera tips from these guys. But before we do that, I want to go around the horn and get some just final thoughts on this topic, because it is a contentious issue. This is probably the busiest chat we've ever had with people on both sides. So it's an issue that polarizes hunters, good and bad. So let's start with Dan, since Dan's got a little bit of a delay today. Dan, closing thoughts on the issue.
I'm up in the air. I don't want to see trail cameras go away, but I want to see a solve to an issue in some areas of the country where they're getting out of hand. I want to have some places to go in the woods where I can still find deer that nobody knows about, kind of. I don't know if that'll ever be the possibility again, but now that we're here. But I could go either way. I'm your independent voter here.
Yeah. And before we go to Jake or Chad, real quick, I'm going to chime in because this just popped into my head. Montana's got some archery only / primitive areas. It'd be interesting to see maybe some limited WMAs in each state do something like that where they, no electronics at all. Maybe that's one possible route. I'm just thinking out loud. But Jake, go ahead.
We do kind of have that. Federal lands don't allow them. Never did, at least in Wisconsin.
Well, yeah, I guess something that is something to consider. So typically it takes some time for laws to catch up with technology. And so in let's say 2017, 2018 is when I would say Spartan really hit this market and people started buying cell cameras. And then throughout that time period, they have become much more affordable and the technology has changed. And so now legislation is finally catching up to this too. And so I think that the impact has been felt and maximized over the years. I guess my personal opinion on this is I really want what's best for the resource and best for the people that are enjoying the resource. And so I don't know what that looks like, because Iowa can be the prime example of the age structure got better and there's been better opportunities and the general consensus is, man, this is great. Or B, there's still people doing it that are dishonest and it's way harder and I'm still getting my picture taken by random people and then they're going and sabotaging my areas and I can't monitor, but they can. And you're trying to put a game warden on a wild goose chase. I don't think that would be the greatest good of the second. So ultimately, I love whitetails. I've designed my life to be around them and everything about it. And so that's what I want to continue to protect. So when I have children, they can still enjoy it. And whatever that is, that's what I want. And I don't know what the answer to that is.
That's well said, Jake. And, my personal opinion, obviously, is not far away from Jake's. I mean, we are in this. This is our full-time gig. This is how we pay our bills, support our families. So, but I don't want people to tune into this and listen and think that we're blindly pro to this, right? Because that's not the case. I think the bigger worry, as Jake just communicated, is the long-term effects of what we're doing here, both on technology side, regulation side, access side, and the exploitation of resources, that being the whitetail, right? And if we're not careful about what we do, like, this thing's fragile enough to go away. Like, you're seeing these attacks in the Western culture, which, Jeremy, you're probably more hip on some of this stuff than what I am, but you have you know, the bear stuff going on in the state of Washington. You have the cat and the predator stuff happening in Colorado. Like you have the wolf reintroduction, the elk herd. Like there's so much chaos happening right now, and it seems like the bulk of hunters are whitetail hunters, and everybody's just like sell camera, sell camera, sell camera, and it's like, guys, there's a lot of other stuff going on that we need to pay attention to. So that would be, again, that's kind of off the cell camera topic, but that's the message that I want to send to people.
No, great points from everybody, and appreciate it. Like I said, this is a contentious issue right now, and you guys, I think you presented some really balanced perspectives, especially as business owners and, you know, being in the field. So appreciate that. And it is a difficult conversation to have, and I'd like to think that these are the type of conversations, not to get way off track, that people politically should be having, where they have real conversations from all sides. But unfortunately, we don't get that. But we don't want to digress there. So pretty heavy topic there. Let's shift gears. Let's talk about Exodus Outdoors. A lot of people follow you guys on YouTube. You do a lot of great stuff with like the cribs and you know, your products. So let's talk about what's new with Exodus. Any new products, hunts you guys are planning on doing. Jake, if you want to talk about, you got a great podcast called The Land Podcast. You want to touch on that? So let's go. Let's start with Jake and what's new with Exodus.
Yeah, well, it's funny. I remember distinctly. It was 2018, so maybe not as distinctly as I thought. 2018, and we did an interview with Dan way back. Like this would have been like episode 3, and I remember we had like 600 or 700 subscribers on our YouTube channel, and we posted a video with Dan. And it resonated extremely well. And I remember you shared it and like, we hit 1,000 subscribers. Are you kidding me? Wow. And I was sitting in the tree stand on like November 4th or something, or 3rd. I was like, oh my gosh, we hit 1,000. This is insane. 1,000 people subscribed to our channel. Now, you know, over the course of 9 years, we got that to 100,000, which is crazy. So I'd appreciate the compliment on the content, but it's not possible with people like everyone on this call here right now. And so it was not a solo effort. And then, I'll pass it over on some things we have going on. We've been teasing the Exodus app, and Chad, I see one more gray hair since this afternoon, I think, and it may be caused from that project. So I'll let you take that over.
I think I might have given one today too.
Maybe. Yeah. So like, I guess, you know, on the cell camera topic, the biggest project that we've ever tackled in our company history is about to come to light here in a handful of weeks. And that is the software tied to connected devices or cellular trail cameras. So that is not only big for us, but it's very intuitive to empower the people using those cameras on the analytical side, right? Like this is something, again, we're going to go down the technology wormhole, but everybody in the industry, not everybody, there are several players in the industry on the mobile app side who are all chasing this magic formula, right? Like they're looking to compile data, which data is valuable, but they want to, the model is to predict deer movement and tell you need to hunt on spot X, right? Like that's what everybody's getting geared towards, which I don't necessarily agree with. But anyways, back to the app. That is the new product that is coming. A lot of powerful features in there that we're pretty damn proud of, honestly. It's a very friendly, easy to use app, price point competitive against Tacticam and SpyPoint and like all those lower end data plans that kind of fuel the fire for mass deployment of cell cameras. Like we are right there competing with those, brands that are, 10 times our size. So that's really exciting for us. And then I don't know, there's always 5 or 6 other projects going on kind of at the same time. It's but we'll see what else comes to light. We're fortunate enough that we're not tied to any special dates like some other industry companies are, where they have to meet. We got to have this product done by the ATA show so we can have get this into these retailers' hands. Like when stuff's ready, we just release it. That's just kind of the way we operate. And if it's not right, then we don't let it go.
Is there any details you can share about the app, and do you have a tentative launch date? We won't hold you to it, but just curious.
July 1st, tentative launch date, which is actually 2 months later than what the target was. The target was May 1st, but we're rounding out stuff now, and we get published shortly. Tentative launch date, moving target date, July 1st. I mean, we can share as much as you want at this point around the app. I don't know what kind of details you're looking for, but a variety of different plan styles, unlimited plans starting at $14 for the first camera, all the way down to $12 for additional cameras. And then we also have freestyle plans where, the devices itself aren't held captive to different settings or limited on videos or limited on HD downloads or anything of that nature, where you essentially buy a chunk of data. You can attach as many cameras as you want to that data, and you use it however the hell you want to use it, because it was your data and your money that was spent on it. So and you can mix and match and put cameras on different plans. I mean, that's probably from a consumer standpoint, that's one big attraction. Every photo sequence or video sequence that's fed in to the app has an API call for weather data. So there's no more looking at multiple apps to pull. We can have weather data rate tied to that specific photo on the timestamp, based on that timestamp. There's AI and machine learning to auto tag or auto filter photos. And like right now, the wormhole that we're going down, so the team that we've contracted out to build this, like they're building out the AI stuff to recognize squirrels. Like that's how deep they're going into this stuff. So there's auto features for vehicles, humans, bucks, does, squirrels, raccoons, like the whole deal, right? Jake, am I missing anything?
No, I think the biggest thing is the data plans, because that's when we're at a trade show or someone, hey, you sell cameras, what are your guys' data plans? That's the first question people ask anymore. It used to be, what's the trigger speed? What's the warranty? And so all of that has kind of gone to the side, and we still have a 5-year warranty, and we still have 5-year no BS warranty as well. But the freestyle plan and the unlimited plan, if you're an unlimited guy, buy the unlimited plan. If you want to do the freestyle plan, another great option. So it's just really easy to use. A lot of time and work has gone into getting this thing ready for July, and we're extremely excited. And what people may have picked up is, like, we listen to feedback so much, and so the first version is not going to be the last version. So if there's things that need to be tweaked, or if there's features that we hear a lot of people would really like, we're going to build it and we're going to implement it. And then if we need to do something different, we'll do it down the road.
Now, I don't run any cell cams, so this is probably a dumb question on my part, but is this going to be a direct download from your website or from like the Play Store or the Apple Store? What's the app look like as far as, and how are people going to get it?
iTunes and Google Play. Yeah. And a web portal too. Perfect.
And now so this app is in addition to just what was standard data plans, that app, I guess that's what I'm asking. And you touched on some of them, Chad, but what additional features does the app give you? For example, when you talked about subject recognition, is that going to like categorize your photos and folders, or what? Talk to me a little bit more about the features.
Yeah, so the AI machining portion of the app does essentially exactly what you do. It allows you to auto tag photos, automatically sort them, run analytical reports or photo sorting filters based on those tags, and the machine learning as it's computing and adding tags to each kind of individual photo. So it's a way of, we look at it as like advanced data processing, instead of looking and scrolling through or plugging them into a third-party software or something like what John Livingston did with Deer Lab, right? Like that's a paid subscription model where you're manually feeding those photos and it's spitting out analytical information to you. Like this program does, all of that for you. So it goes back to you're selling people time. And like, I know that people don't totally grasp that, but like when you get serious about trying to figure out a big deer, and like, man, like it can consume you. And like I've been there, Jake's been there, Dan's been there more than once, probably, maybe not with tracking them with trail cameras, but like just being obsessed and taking up a lot of time. But yeah,
I got not to go back to what we discussed, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a hot take. I think when we look at a lot of the complaints going on, there's 3 things that are really powerful when it comes to killing deer right now. in the world of archery season? Crossbows, baiting, cell cameras. Pick two.
You want me to pick two?
No, I'm saying like you can't have all three because that's clearly too powerful of a trio. But if you take cell cameras away and you still have bait and crossbows, okay, well, it's a lot less effective with a cell camera. If you have baiting and cell cameras, take crossbows away, okay, that's a lot more less effective. And the list goes on. So it's like, I don't know why cell cameras have just been stamped with this needs to be changed when there's two other really powerful pieces of legislation that allow really high level of efficiencies.
Yeah.
That's just my thought. That's my personal thought in general.
I think there's kind of a misconception with cell cameras with people that don't use them. I think Chad hit on it earlier that some people just think that if you put one up, like in a bedding area, that you'll know when the deer's bedded there and you can go kill it, and it is not that easy, as we learned.
Sorry to derail there. That crossed my mind there, and I had to share it.
No, it's good. And right now, so today's June 4th. I think a lot of people, normal hunters, start kicking off their, a lot of guys run them year round, but a lot of guys start June and July is like the kickoff for camera deployment. So I want to talk to both of you guys about some of your best practices. What type of cameras are you putting where, conventional versus cell cam, and what type of areas are you putting your cameras in right now?
I'll start that. I'll lead off on that. On the standard SD card side and versus the cell camera side, like right now, I am deploying cell cameras from a consumer standpoint. I probably would still, it wouldn't change my behavior in the way that I'm using trail cameras, even if I didn't own a trail camera company. I think that's important for folks to understand, but it is legal to use them here in Ohio on public ground. And in areas that I am less familiar with, it's about casting a wide net and finding a big deer. Like that's like, I'm not going to hide that. Like I'm searching for a certain type of deer, and that doesn't matter if I'm using trail cameras or if I'm out driving the roads with my daughter and son in the evening time glassing. Like that's all part of it, right? But I'm using those cell cameras to cast a wide net in areas that are not, I don't want to say more intrusive, but take me longer to get into. Like I don't want to keep, if I had to walk 3 miles on a piece of public, I want to do that once and leave that camera there versus going in at the end of summer and checking it, and then maybe going in twice to make sure weeds didn't grow up over top of it or trimming branches of things of that nature. So in those longer, harder to get to spots, that's where I'm using cell cameras over the summer. Now that could be in feeding areas that are hard to get to because of access. That could be in bedding areas, even though that they're going to change. Like, again, I'm just trying to find the deer, right? And then on those easy to get to spots, the spots that are close to parking lots, the spots that are close to roads, the spots that are on the corner of any kind of ag field or fallow field or CRP or whatever the case is, that's where I'm sticking those regular cameras because they're easy to get to. I can pop in before work, pull a card, get to work. It takes me 10 minutes. And my deployment on those, again, goes back to, like, I need to either find a deer or confirm a deer is alive from last year. Like, those are the two objectives for me personally with summer trail cameras.
Yeah, the verify a deer is still alive or find a new one. I mean, that's an exciting time of the season. One of the most exciting times of the year, because there's the buck you probably remember last year. You maybe didn't get pictures of him in January, and you're hoping he's still alive. So, these are probably, none of these are groundbreaking, but soybeans, alfalfa, cloverfield, like those are some great locations to get an idea of what deer are in the area. I mean, I just love community scrapes year round, period. And, they're called, I feel like we've all sometimes overcomplicated everything when it comes to hunting. And there's this thing called trail cameras, and you can put them on a trail. And so if there's just a really good pinch point that makes sense and it's used a lot, that could be a great place to put a camera and let it soak over the summer. And I think that it's easy to maybe get a little overexcited for the season when you're like, I have all these velvet bucks. And then come October, you lose a lot. I've seen them many times where they do come back at some point in the year, but it's just an exciting time. It's a great part of the year. I mean, minus the heat and the ticks, but it's what you love to do, you're going to do it and you're going to enjoy it. And just put these out and try to figure out what's going on. And if something doesn't work, put it in a different spot and just consistently be learning and enjoy the whole process of hopefully finding the deer.
If there's ever an argument for cell cams, it's ticks. I hear
So
you.
I'll do the same thing as Chad with cameras for locating deer. But I'm also glassing, I'm also shining, which is pretty much the same thing. The camera is out there doing the work for you when you're not available to do it. But I'm also using cameras in a way to learn stuff, to put them in the areas to figure things out. I know you guys were gracious enough to help me with a big study I did where I put cameras into bedding areas and studied how often the deer are there and stuff. And I figured out a lot of stuff with that. We figured out that there's 2-week patterns in these bedding areas, and that even a really well-used bedding area, usually that big buck's there for like a 2-week period, and putting the camera there year after year, leaving it there and leaving that bedding area alone, you start to find out that repeats year after year, the same time frames. And, I wouldn't know any of that. It would all be a guess. I did kind of have a little bit of an inkling going that way, but I thought it was a longer span of time they were bedding in these areas, but those cameras really put it on point. And I also saw that these bucks were date specific. I mean, it was almost to the day that they would return to those same bedrooms, and so without the cameras, I wouldn't have learned a lot of the things that I've learned.
One other point that I think that people maybe overlook too are like running trail cameras this time of year. Everyone's has big deer on their mind. Everyone's trying to find bucks, but there's a lot to learn on a new piece of ground based on when those fawns are dropping. Like if you can use the gestation period and backdate those, not maybe like we all know it's a bell curve, right? And the second week in November, the majority of does get bred. But when you find those outliers, maybe that tells you something about that specific parcel that you would not learn until this coming October. So like if you got access to a new piece and you have no history with it, like you still can learn things, to Dan's point, about that parcel, how it may hunt. It's not going to give you, exact. I mean, I guess it does give you an exact date on gestation period. Like you're going to go back 201 days and know, plus or minus a couple of days, know when that doe was bred. But there are clues that you can get from general deer behavior, not just buck behavior, finding a specific deer with trail cameras throughout the summer.
No, it's great advice. Great advice there.
I have a question, Dan, on that 2-week. Have you found any typical patterns on when a summer buck may leave an area and when it may relocate later during the hunting season? Is there a period of time where you see that type of pattern?
It's kind of hard to see with the camera, when he's not there, right?
Right.
But watching the deer in the summer, I've noticed 2 distinct different types of deer. There's 2 that stay there the whole year and have a really, and when we're just talking mature deer here, you have one type of deer that's a homebody that just stays in a tight area and never leaves it. And you got another deer that just disappears for certain periods of the year and you don't know where it goes. And sometimes you hear about it getting shot 5 miles away, but year after year it would be in an area, at a time frame like notoriously you'll find some buck that's there all summer and fall comes around, you can't find a thing. It's every year. But we also learned through deer collar studies that I guess that's pretty common. There's like 2 classes of deer that do that, but that have different home ranges. But camera wise, it's harder to see that. It's easier to see what's happening in an exact spot, but that doesn't mean it doesn't help you. I mean, while we were talking earlier, I was thinking about a guy who contacted me, and he had these pictures of his buck. And it was a really big buck. He was a real old guy, and he had his camera right where he hunted, and his buck would come by about 4 times a week on a specific wind. And he says, every time I hunt there, this buck doesn't come in. I can't figure it out. And I looked at a map, and where he was hunting was right in view of a big point. And literally, I just told him back up, 50 yards. The deer could see him, But without those pictures, we couldn't have put that puzzle together. You know what I mean? He wouldn't even known that deer was there watching them. You know, cameras teach you a lot, and sometimes it seems small. And that guy got that deer through hunting, through setting up in the right spot and all that. But without the camera, he probably wouldn't even have known that deer had existed. And he would have given up on that spot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, guys, oh, sorry, go ahead, Jake.
So I think there's a couple other things for summer trail cameras that are important tips too, of treating your camera with insect repellent to avoid ants taking over. That's something that is really important that a lot of people don't do. And then obviously vegetation, it's June, and what your vegetation is going to look like in August is going to be 4 or 5 foot taller. So keep that in mind as you're setting those suckers up. Otherwise, you're going to have a really disappointing card pull when it comes to the end of the summer when you get 1,000 pictures of grass floating around.
Right. We're going to go ahead and we talked about it, go into some Q&A. Ashley's going to do that. Before we do that, where can people find you on social media, and where can they check out your products if they're interested in purchasing a trail camera?
Yeah, they can check everything out at ExodusOutdoorGear.com. Something we didn't talk about, we have arrows as well. So we have MMTs and NIS. So we have tailor-built arrows on our website. And then if you want to hear about future product releases, you can subscribe to our email newsletter. And we don't spam you. We'll just give you the news that you need. And then we have our YouTube channel, ExodusOutdoorGear.com. And then our Exodus podcast, new episodes every Tuesday. And if you follow along there, you'll find everything else. It'll spider web out.
Awesome. Appreciate that. And then I think, Ashley, if you can hear me, pop on and we'll switch into the Q&A here.
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, I missed your message. I was scrolling through my stuff.
Oh, you're good. Go ahead.
All right. So it was more so opinions tonight than it was questions. Do you want me to start with the questions or just kind of go from the beginning and work our way down?
No, just go ahead and hit the questions.
Okay. So, yeah, hang on. I should have organized this better. I'm sorry.
No, you're learning on the job. That's all right.
So there's a lot of people that were wondering about like Onyx and Spartan Forge and all of that stuff, and how that works with the laws and regulations that are going into play.
Fair point.
The electronics.
That's something that
is a good point.
when people get into the efficiency debate, and that's often tied to cell cameras, that it's making us too efficient, right? And it's violating some of the fair chase stuff. That has always been my argument. Like, if you send me into the woods I can read paper maps, I can read topo maps, I can navigate with a compass, I know that stuff. But if you gave me the choice between giving up cell cameras or Onyx, I would give up cell cameras before I gave up Onyx. That's my personal take on it.
Yeah. Anybody else
have
an opinion on that one?
When apps became real popular, that's when I started seeing the real flood in the public land. Because before the apps, what I noticed is a lot of people didn't get very far from the road. And now you see people in the middle of these swamps and stuff. I used to have that to myself. I used to follow a paper map and a compass. And the people that did get back there, you'd see them come out well before dark. Sometimes like you shoot a deer or something, you get out and you're like, what happened to everybody? It's not even closing time yet. No, like the trucks are gone, because people were afraid of the woods when they didn't have Onyx or Spartan Forge or whatever app they were using.
I know it makes me a lot more comfortable in the woods. Me still being a newbie and everything, I can figure my way out because I'm a cat in a paper bag. I can't at all. There was another one for Chad and Jake. Do you think there should be a limit on cameras or more regulations than a ban?
I think to Dan's point, limits on public ground, I think that would be a viable option. That's probably what I would lean towards the most if there was something to be in place. Because I realistically, I think there's still going to be a lot of cameras on public in Iowa this year. And I think there's still going to be a lot of people that just to run them anyways. So if they could do it legally, and guys that want to do it honestly, they could register their 5 cameras and put them out and enjoy them.
Yeah, I'm pro regulation over pro ban. but the challenge is always, on the enforcement side, which we touched on, is like how are state agencies or wildlife agencies, federal agencies going to enforce those regulations? But I would be pro regulation over pro ban and mixing them.
I'd kind of like to say something about the last question yet. That Onyx Spartan Forge app thing kind of sparked something with me. I don't know if you guys remember back quite a ways. The Pope and Young Club went on this big thing about their electronics rule, and they were throwing people out of the record books, striking all their records, and making them out to be a criminal if they used a lit knock, because a lit knock was an electronic.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, if I was banning electronics on public land, lit knocks are electronics. They could go back and they could say my video camera's an electronic, but that's not an aid of hunting, but a knock is. And Pope and Young proved that, because they were, if you're, I know, Chad, you're old enough to remember that. They were
Thanks, Dan.
pulling people out of the books. You're not as young as I am.
No, that's a good point. Like, again, like you get in that gray area of electronics, and it's like, I'll be the first one to raise my hand. I'll be the first one to raise my hand. How many times have you been in the field, in the woods, and I'm sure we're probably all guilty of it, as 99% of other hunters, where you see a deer from your tree stand and you text a buddy, say, "Oh, I just saw a good one cross 100 yards out, headed in this direction." Like, we all do that. But technically, if you read the regs, and that is illegal. So it's like, I mean, you got to have some common sense, applying some of the existing regulations. But yeah, I don't know. It's a never-ending wormhole, is what it is.
Yep. So Meet Me at the Creek had a question, and I'm assuming I don't know. I feel like it might be more for Dan. It says, what is your go-to non-cell camera? They enjoy soaking cams and seeing what comes in and seeing nature. They're not interested in a cell cam, and they don't want to pay for it or be involved with what comes with a cell cam.
That camera is probably more aimed at those guys. I just grab whatever I got. I got a variety of cameras, and as a matter of fact, I got some Exodus ones that work awesome. But I don't think Exodus is making regular cell cams or regular trail cams anymore. Are you guys?
It's been a couple years, but we do have a new one coming in. Is that in July too? We didn't even talk about that. Yeah.
No. Yeah.
End of summer.
Late summer. Yeah.
Well, that's coming up pretty quick.
Project straight, I guess. But yeah, we do have another regular SD card camera coming late this summer. But you're right, we haven't had one in a couple years.
And then I just found one, but I lost it. They were asking if you could elaborate on how to insect proof a camera.
Yeah. So one of the easiest things would be to get some electrical tape or duct tape and tape over any of the microphone holes. That's a really easy point where they sneak in. And then the other is just putting some granule or insect repellent and putting it in your camera. And then when you fold it up or put the door back on, those are two really easy ways. And I mean, Chad, I'm sure you've had a couple other tricks along the years to bug proof.
Yeah, typically what I do is use permethrin. You can spray permethrin and soak your camera straps in permethrin. That works really good. You can spray it on a cotton swab or something and stick it inside the camera. That works just as well. I always have permethrin on me. Like, I'm more worried about, like, they're like, if there's one thing that could leave the face of the earth and I wouldn't feel bad about it, it would be chiggers. But yeah, permethrin works pretty well.
We use a lot of permethrin around here. We end up with chiggers in our yard, and it is the worst thing out there, I swear. Washington doesn't have chiggers, or I never found them there, but it has been the worst. All right, so there was one that I wanted to find where I scrolled, and I'm still learning. I'm sorry, guys. Bear with me for just a second. It was one that was gloating you guys. DK Construction said, I love the Exodus dudes. These fellows are so down to earth and just plain good dudes. And then there's a lot of people that are wondering how they're going to possibly ban them on private, like how that's going to work, because baiting is illegal and a lot of people still bait. So how are they planning on working that and actually sticking with it?
It's $1 million question right now. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, they're relying again, like it's the honesty policy, right? It's the same affidavit that you have to now sign off on. Like if you want to enter a deer in the books, like if you want a deer in Boone and Crockett, there's like that's part of the affidavit, like the fair chase affidavit. So it just goes back to honest people being good people being honest, you know, self-regulation, I guess.
Ashley, I'm going to jump in real quick. We had a question from Newbie for Chad and Jake. Is there an option to directly share photos from the new upcoming app to friends, social media, email, etc.?
Yeah, and you can share cameras. You can share cameras, share photos, etc. Yeah.
What do you mean by share cameras? Like you could put a friend on the access list, or?
Yeah.
Say that I have cameras out on a piece down the road here, and Dan's coming out to hunt with me this fall, and I want him to see the photos of our upcoming prospects or target deer, whatever the case is. He can download the app for free, and then I can share all of those cameras with an unlimited amount of people. I can share it with everybody on this call right now, and you guys can all get those photos sent to your phone via the Exodus app for free.
Pretty cool. Will that be in real
Everybody
time,
that
just
wants
like it
to
would be for a
share,
camera owner?
share photos with me, give me the GPS locations too.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if I skipped past them. I knew I had that one, but I couldn't find it. But I don't know if there's too many other questions. I feel like a lot of it was opinion based tonight, which makes sense.
Sure.
Considering the topic.
Yeah, pretty polarizing topic. Well, it's we're right at an hour, so that's a good place to wrap up. So
I think it's kind of like politics.
How were those opinions
Chad?
split? Like this is something that we're always trying to weigh. Is it 60-40 pro con? Like what how were the opinions in your opinion? How was the field tonight?
It was kind of like nobody was super mad about the bans. They were more so like mad about the what's the private land ban portion of it. Like they get public land, but they're mad about the private portion of it more so than anything. And I get that because it's their property and it's imposing on their property. So it's a toss up, but a lot of people were kind of for it. And some other people were even saying to throw drones in there with it. So it's just a toss up really. Cause I don't really want to say 50-50 because there was more for it. It seemed as long as it wasn't imposing on their public land or private land rights. My bad.
Mm-hmm. Hey, one more question, guys. We got a late breaking one and a good one. What this is Out of Control Motorsports. He says, what cell service do the new cameras use? Are there multiple carrier options available?
Yeah, so over the course of years, we've had this, the same progression as a lot of other camera companies, I guess. You have dedicated hardware that's tied to specific networks that are limited in that capacity. And then as technology has progressed, now you have a multitude of carriers on specific IoT sims that you just hit activate, turn the damn thing on, and it does its thing and finds its own tower. So all the new cameras are essentially in that capacity.
Perfect. Like I said, we're right at an hour. It's probably a good place to wrap up. So I want to turn it over to Dan, but before I do, I want to say, Jake, Chad, special thanks for coming on, and especially last minute. I think we had a real good discussion, and you guys brought up a lot of good points on both sides of the aisle. So appreciate you guys coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate it. Respect what you guys do, and it's our honor to be part of this here tonight.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys. I look at you both as real, not just business owners, but stewards of our wildlife and our hunting. You're both very avid real hunters, like our viewers. Not just business owners. I know me and Chad have hunted together. Wouldn't mind hunting with you too, Jake, sometime. But really great having you on here. And I don't think I could really have anybody else on who is a camera owner who would talk about tough things. And I appreciate that, as do I'm sure our viewers. I probably don't think we're changing too many minds either way. I think people are pretty set in their ways. It's kind of like politics, but it is good to discuss it and let people hear both sides.
Yep, absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks again, everyone. Appreciate you tuning in. We will be back next Tuesday, 7 p.m. Central. We'll catch you then. Bye, everybody.